Hello, welcome to the Amy Noel on Dyslexia YouTube channel. I'm really excited to make this video. It's been in the works for months now. Before I get into the video, as always, please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. I have 5 sons, 4 of them have dyslexia. On this channel I share informative videos about what I'm learning and what we're doing to help our sons. Trevor Clark from Canada reached out to me and asked if I would share his story and a presentation that he made on my YouTube channel. Trevor is 24 years old. He was diagnosed as a child in elementary school. He went to a special school for dyslexia and they told him that his dyslexia was too severe to remediate. So he had the idea in his head that he was a hopeless case. He went through school feeling this way, and then a little while back he decided that he would do some research, and he had the determination to learn how to read. For 2 years he worked very, very hard, just himself and a group of his friends, and he was able to remediate himself to a very high level. During those 2 years he did a lot of research on what works for reading, the science of reading. So he wore the hats of the researcher, the teacher, and the student during that time. What he did was truly remarkable because it's very difficult to have severe dyslexia and remediate yourself, especially on your own. He likes to compare himself to Will Hunting from the movie Good Will Hunting.
You dropped $150 grand on an education you could have got for $1.50 in late charges at the public library.
After all of his research and his personal experience, Trevor feels like he can remediate anyone. This is exactly what he's dedicated his life to full-time now. He has a website that I'll put a link to in the description. He has an electronic resource that you can download there, and you can also contact him for help with your own remediation. As a parent, I find his presentation that I'm about to share very valuable because of the studies that he summarizes with source details. I also really like that he shares exactly what worked for him. I got some good ideas for what I can do for my own children from watching this presentation. I put timestamps in the video description of this video so that you can see what topics are covered and skip ahead if you would like to. Without further ado, here's Trevor Clark.
This is what I was able to do by myself with help of friends and private tutors, very short periods of time. I started learning the science of reading and how reading should be done and what schools are missing. And I just want to really draw that point that a school board couldn't remediate me that was designed to teach dyslexics how to read. I kept it as close to the fundamentals of reading that the research shows us that is really important to work on, and I worked on those things. I had pre and post tests along the way of multiple different standardized measures, and as you can see across these measures, my standardized score point gains were 20, which is quite enormous considering some of them are time test, and in some of the ones that are time test I have differences of 18 standardized score points, which is amazing. Most studies don't even show time results. Just to compare it on the other end of the spectrum, when you do see studies of some programs that are deemed as like effective or mildly effective, they're ending up having 10 or 12. This test was really cool to me. When I went to the demonstration school, I was the same test and I gained 5 standardized score points in 2 years at a school, again, that was designed to teach me. And in this one, I made 35 standardized score point difference. It took a lot of work, but you can truly remediate anyone if you're willing to put the time in and do the correct things. I have a really good work ethic and I'm really good at just putting in the hard yards and doing that hard work. So back in, I think it was 2012, I finished 8th for 5K open water swim in provincials. When you compare training for an Ironman and learning to read for myself, they both require the same amount of work and attention to detail. So it's not an easy thing that anyone can just do, but it can be done if you're willing to work really hard. So this is my definition of dyslexia, and in short, it basically just says it's a word level decoding problem, word level in isolation. And then why I want to highlight why it says accurate and or fast, because in a country or in a language like Spanish, where there's only 10 sounds, that correlation to what letters or what words look like and what words sound like is a lot more straightforward. There's a lot less overlap, and in English, where that overlap is a lot more, then it's both its accuracy and fluency, but in German and those other languages, it's more about fluency. So retraining the brain, this is something that we talk about a lot, but we're ending up not doing a lot of those, breaking of bad habits and whatnot. These were some sort of things that I stumbled upon. Dyslexics like to read words using 100% visual memory, when real readers don't do that. They read it from their lexicon, which is orthographically mapped into their brain, and dyslexics don't do that, so we have to train our brains not to read using visual memory. So I read a lot of mixed text and mixed cases, as you can see here, a lot, and I felt this really helped me break that habit. And then also using lookalike words. So I put lookalike words in sentences, has or as, and then for of, etc. Just those little word errors, those little words that look the same and can be easily mistaken. And of course, reading upside down. I did this for 20 minutes with a friend. I don't think it made any difference at all in terms of gains, but what it did do is it gave me a lot of confidence, and it made my reading in real world life to be more relevant and more usable. After I did this for about 20 minutes of reading upside down and reading with the paper just slightly off to the left or the right, it gave me a lot of confidence that I didn't need things perfectly in front of me, that I could read them essentially without them being perfectly in front of me. So I want to talk about early intervention really quickly. So we know that early intervention is much better. This is a study from Lovett. She found that the effects of a remediation program in grade 1 or 2 was twice as effective as in grade 3, which is huge, twice as effective in grade 1 as opposed to in grade 3. So early intervention is really, really key. Same thing the National Reading Panel found when they looked at phonics instruction. They found that it was very effective in grade 1 and in kindergarten, and then after grade 2 to 6, they found that it was half as effective, so the same thing. And those are consistent findings that we find across the research. So right now we're basically doing it all backwards. We're diagnosing, accommodating, and then remediating, but really we should be doing the other things. We should be screening, remediating, accommodating, and then saving the diagnosis for the people that don't respond. It's so much harder and takes so much more work to put in once they're past grade 3. And to close that fluency gap once you're past grade 3 is nearly impossible because there's so much retraining of the brain to do. There's multiple different ways to do things. There's not just one way to remediate. And when I found out about that, it made me think that there is room for, I'm going to say error, there is room for things not to be perfect to get words mapped into your brain. So this study here done by Joe Torgesen, they took lips, which we already knew from looking at a bunch of studies beforehand was a very effective program and has lots of research done on it. And then Joe Torgesen and his colleagues made a program called Embedded Phonics, EP, and you can see the differences of the times that they spent doing phonemic awareness, reading sight words, and then reading in text. And then if you look at the end of the study after 2 years, they found that both programs were equally as effective. And then same thing here. This is a study by Dr. Trush done in 2014. He compared lips and phonographics and his own program, Discover Reading. As you can see, 3 programs, all relatively different, but they all end up at the same effect size at the end. And that's because, again, they work on phonological awareness, they directly teach letter sounds, and then they end up having the same effect size. So this study here, really cool study that Jack Fletcher and a couple other colleagues did, stop debating about the best methods, especially when it comes to early remediation for reading interventions. So there's group A, which was taught with 100% fidelity, used 100% decodable text. Everything was very structured. Teachers were taught to a T. Nothing was left up to chance. Everything was very structured, very orderly. And then there was group B, which was more of an unscripted style and more of a responsive style. So they used leveled text instead of teachers being very structured and regimented on doing this and this and this. They had meetings once a week where the teachers got together and they basically talked of different strategies of what they felt that was working. And at the end of the study, they found that both programs were just as effective as the other. And that comes down to, 1, it being an early intervention study, and then 2, they both worked on the core issues of directly teaching letter sounds and directly tackling the core issue of phonemic awareness. So this is something that I want to just brush over quickly. Do teachers really even know what they're doing? So this was a study that was taken in 2009. 80% of teachers defined phonological awareness as letter sound correspondence, which is not. When I got this study, I felt physically ill. Also in this study, teachers didn't even seem to mention that synthetic phonics was the preferred method for phonics. So it's really confusing to me that teachers don't know these things. And then I collected my own study. I asked 31 tutors from a website, and some of them were tutors that were trained at universities for 4 years. Some of them were trained for a few weeks at a clinic somewhere, and they were all trained in some sort of program. Some of them were even resource teachers. Some of them were even grade 1 teachers. And I said, here's my assessment. How would you teach me? What would be your game plan? And I felt 2 had an okay understanding of what they were looking at and what they would do in the science of reading. 6 people were saying things that they would work on my vocabulary, which if you looked at my assessment, you would see that it falls in the 50th percentile. And then others would just say the basic thing of, I would start teaching you that letter sound connection, which kind of doesn't make any sense because you look at my assessment and it shows for orthographic knowledge letter sounds that my score is 98%. And some of these tutors were charging upwards of $250 an hour. Again, we store words in our brain in individual sounds. It's synthetic phonics, one-to-one sound correspondent, not whole word, no matter what. So this is reading and how it breaks up into the system. You need understanding of print, then phonological awareness, then sight word decoding, fluency, vocabulary comprehension. A story has paragraphs, sentences, words, syllables, individual sounds, phonemes. Work from the bottom up to the top, 3 levels of word level reading, blending letter sounds, and then it's phonological and then phonemic awareness. So I basically stopped trying to learn to read, and I wanted to learn the skills in isolation. So I wanted to put all the puzzle pieces on the table and then connect them together, as opposed to what I'm seeing a lot of people doing of trying to put things on the table and connect them when sometimes that piece isn't even there to connect it. What's the point of a remediation program or an intervention? Is to get really good at word level reading. Also, we'll say oral fluency. You want to be at the peak of all of those skills at the end of your remediation. I want to really drive that point across of like, it's okay to not always be trying to get better at oral reading fluency. You end up not spending enough time working on the phonological awareness. So this is the definition of phonological awareness, and you can pause the video and read it. Here's a definition of synthetic phonics. You can pause the video and read it, but in short, one-to-one sound correspondent. So this is the first study done by Bradley and Bryant that basically proved the importance of phonemic awareness and how that links to reading achievement. This is a study from Ehri. She points out the growing evidence linking phonemic awareness to sight word recognition. So that means if you see a word, you can instantly read it and know what it is. And that's what enhances your ability to store words into your lexicon, so you can instantly retrieve them. You can read words essentially faster than you can recognize a single letter or a single digit because it's orthographically mapped in your brain. I'm going to talk about syllables, and I'm going to talk about phonemic awareness at the phoneme level before I was finally able to hear it, that silver does have 2 syllables and was able to break it up. Moving syllables around inside of words is a great way to strengthen your phonological awareness. The National Reading Panel found that doing manipulations is the best way to remediate by far. So how I did my remediation, I used Equipped for Reading Success by Dr. David Kilpatrick and a book from the Haggerty Company, along with some other vowel replace drills and some other oral spelling things and whatnot. It took 42 hours just between those 2 books, which is a lot, before I was able to start orthographically mapping words. So here's some examples also of doing manipulations. So this would be a way you could do it with letter tiles or pen to paper, smash, and then say change smash to stash. And then you can do it with just blocks of colors. So these are sound holders. This is trick, and instead of tr, say n. Hopefully you would have said nick, and you would have made those substitutions with those color blocks. Doing it 100% oral, say tuna, don't say t, and then you're left with una, and then say Eve, and then at the start say st, and hopefully you would have said Steve. Tina, instead of t, say n. Nina. There's this way, which is really good because it works on that phonological working memory aspect as well. Change Karen to Aaron. What did I change? So you drop the k once you do have a base level of phonological awareness, then thinking about letter sounds being stored in visual memory, it just takes a lot of exposures. I did it in 3 weeks. So I did 2 hours essentially of learning letter sounds, and then I would do space learning, which I would do where I had these flashcards that were truly sound first, all the ways to show the sound R. So there's R, RW, RR or RH, and I would write it down pen to paper, and I did that 3 times a day. And I tried to do this very consistently before I went to bed, because as we know, storing things into our long-term memory, doing them right before bed is really effective. I was still doing some phonological awareness and still doing some oral reading. There's 44 phonemes in the English language, which means there's 44 sounds, and then there's 176 ways to show them. So I took a list of 7,000 most common words. I want to highlight AR. Everyone says it says R, and which it does 47% of the time, and then it says 30% of the time, and then 20% of the time it says air, and then 3% of the time it says or. So embedded mnemonics means the picture is embedded into the letter, not beside it. Suffixes. This is funny to me that teaching English suffixes, a lot of programs don't even teach them, and they don't offer students a really good decoding strategy for them, considering they're very highly irregular. We know we store words better into our brains if it's one-to-one sound correspondent. So why are you holding up a flashcard or pointing it out in a word that this says shun? We need to teach people how to break that up and put labels on those sounds and how to store them into our brain. For that YouTube video, it explains how I taught suffix endings to myself and what I did. So we have a lot of research showing that nonsense word blending is really effective. You have to really match what your eyes see to what the letters are saying. There's no schwas to deal with. There's no cheating. You can't use set or variability skills in sounding out a word. Sounding out nonsense words is very helpful with the retraining of the brain as well. So there's a lot of different drills that you can use. Read them and just agree upon that when you see ER, it'll say and then you can also sound switch it to say air, and going through and sounding out words and then sound switching your vowels is really good drills, and then obviously spelling them is really good as well. I use the book Toe by Toe. I didn't go through that book the way how they described it. I just used it because it had a lot of nonsense words and other words, and I did it breaking apart words into mouth syllables, so civilization, and that makes that connection between what we're saying and what words look like. It connects speech to print a lot better. So I found this nonsense word generator when I was making it. So the downside to blending together nonsense words, there's 5 ways you could read a word technically, and it does take away from reading real words and mapping them into your brain. There's not a massive difference between synthetic phonics programs. There is. Here's one by Lovett where it just taught one-to-one sound correspondent, and then the other one taught one-to-one, and then it taught blends as well. And you could see that the difference was only 0.7 difference, so a very small difference. And then the National Reading Panel, they looked at the most effective phonics program and the least effective phonics program. There was a difference of 0.45, but not a huge, massive difference. So I'm just trying to draw that out of people often like to argue of this phonics program is better, etc. We are seeing differences, but they're not massive. We just have to make sure we're doing phoneme manipulations with our phonics programs, and that's what will truly make the great difference. I wanted to put this in here because one of the times I did a talk in London, Ontario, and at the end of it, someone came up to me and was like, oh, this program didn't work for you because you learn differently. That really confused me, and I was just thinking, okay, that's not true. It didn't work because it didn't address the core issues. Very practice reading module. So this is really cool for that oral fluency practice. It basically is 3 stories where Sally went to the grocery store to buy oranges, Sally went to the orchard to pick oranges, and then Sally made orange juice with the oranges that she picked. So it's 3 different stories, but they're all related. They're all using 80% of the same text. The study that I believe was Iowa University, when they did it, they found that it was more effective than reading one story 3 times over for that oral fluency practice. I highly recommend all tutors take the course. It's $20 American, and you get all the content at the end. It's really good. And then there's glass analysis, which is really good for once you have those phonemic awareness elements. And then there's echo readings, where you're both reading at the same time of a passage. So your student and your tutor reading the same time, really effective for helping build that oral fluency reading. And again, repeated reading is still a good thing to do. Fluency word input, when a student is reading something and you're trying to work on fluency and then they get to a word and the student isn't quite getting it, the tutor just inputs that word. This is a really good drill, and they're all sort of things that help with that oral fluency reading. And then sleep, if you are paying for people to go through expensive remediation programs, we know that sleep is just crucial in helping brain regrow. Spelling is super hard, and if anyone has any questions about spelling, you can email me. My email comes up later in this, but here's just some orthographic tendencies that you could just screen snap now. And again, just email me if anyone has any questions about spelling. I've already talked about this, of my idea of remediation of, if you have 100 hours to remediate someone, focus on those core issues for the first 50 hours where you're mainly focusing on phonological awareness, letter sounds, 5 hours of reading text, 2 hours of spelling. And then once you're done and you've remediated those things, then sort of flipping the remediation where you're spending a majority of time reading text. I don't think this way is superior. I just think this way is so much easier and so much more attainable. People often overestimate how well their remediation programs are going, and we're relying right now on so much of anecdotal evidence of this program worked because they said it worked. We don't really know because there was no pre and post test. When I worked with a tutor at the very beginning, I went and got a test, and in one of them it came back as grade 2.2 level, and my tutor went to argue with me and said I was way better than that. There's really not much arguing in standardized tests. It's like if I go to a track and run a 400-meter race, I'm not going to run the track and see my time being slow and argue with the track. It's a standardized measure, so it's very consistent for the most part. So doing pre and post tests is really important if you can find tutors that have had pre and post tests of students. So this is just some benchmarks of words per minute so you can get an idea of how well your student is reading and how well they stack up to the norms. So if any questions, you can email me here. I also have a website. If you go to that exact link, it'll take you to resources. You can download them for free, or you can download them and donate money to the website, which does go to me. And also this slideshow is on that page as well, where you can find all my wonderful references here. The amount of research that went into this slideshow is insane. There was a lot of research and a lot of time, and I hope you guys were able to enjoy it and stick through it to the end. And I hope that you guys will learn something from this. Anyways, bye.